Bienvenido, amigos. Hello again, and welcome to another segment of Doc G's Wine and Spirits Review. As you can see tonight, we've moved outside. The summer is just around the corner, and I couldn't wait to get out in here into the sunshine and watch this beautiful sunset here in my backyard paradise. So welcome to our segment tonight. Tonight we're going to follow up, if you remember on the segment we did on Spain, that there was a special segment that I would like to do on sherry. Well, tonight we're going to take time to do that segment, and trust me, hang in there with me. There's a lot involved in this one, and I have a lot to share with you. So let's get started. Cheers. Or should I say, salud. So, you can see in front of me, there's a lot going on here. There's even some food here on the table. I've already pre-poured all of the examples of sherry. So what I'd like to do with you tonight is talk about the origins and history of sherry, exactly what it is, how it's made. Oh, there's some other general facts, and we're going to devote the majority of the time to walking you through each and every one of these sherries. So let me begin then with the history of this strange and wonderful drink. It dates back, if you know anything about Spanish history, it dates back to the Moorish occupation of the Iberian Peninsula, and I don't want to get into a lot of history. I don't want to really get into a lot of generic facts about this because there's a lot to talk about with just this grape and wine itself. But the area of Spain called Andalusia is where this sherry got its start. It's actually one of the oldest wines to date that can be found, and it made its way to the world as the British invaded the southern part of Spain in the 1500s, and they brought it back to England. And England is kind of known for sherry, but it's really not English, it's Spanish. And so if you fast forward, the rest is history, and you now have sherry being what it is today. Sherry is actually the anglicized version of the Spanish town called Jerez, Jerez, pronounced Jerez, and that has evolved into the word sherry. All sherry is from the DO, which is like an AVA here in the United States. In Spanish, denominación de origen, and the denominación de origen in Spain, where Jerez comes from, is in the south part of the country in Andalusia. There are three towns that form what is known as the Sherry Triangle. They are El Puerto de Santa Maria, the town of Jerez, and Sanlúcar de Barrameda. So all sherry from Spain, it does come from other parts of the world very scantily, but all sherry from Spain must come from the denominación de origen Jerez. So it was the first recognized as a DO in 1933 in Spain. So that gives you a little bit about the origin and the history of what sherry is. So the glass I'm drinking here, and I failed to mention it up front, I'm going to start with this one, and I'm also going to end with it, and it'll help you, it'll give you a full circle of what is in the glass. This is a dry version of a wine and a grape called Pedro Ximénez, and I'll talk about that more at the end as we go full circle, because there's another Pedro Ximénez that we're going to sample in a minute. I'm going to have a sip of this one right now. These are different wines. So what is sherry? Sherry is a fortified and aged white wine that is made specifically from three different Spanish grapes: Palomino, Moscatel, which is Muscat, and the Pedro Ximénez grape. And they all have different qualities to them. The Palomino grape is kind of a saline, lemony. It's got a little bit of big almond kind of note on it. It is really not anything to to shake a stick at until you put it through the sherry process. Moscatel is muscat, which has a more aromatic note on it, some floral qualities to it. And the Pedro Jimenez grape is got a lot of fig on it, does have some lemon, and they all have a certain salinity to them. If you ever had the chance to drink a sherry, the one thing you're going to notice is it's got that real biting saline. It doesn't even, to the average drinker, it might not even seem like wine. So it is one worth trying, though, if you get your opportunity. One of the other reasons that I decided to do this spot is a good friend of mine, who I've been drinking wine with for years, is the one that actually turned me on to sherry. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to do something with this at some point. So tonight is that night. He was going to join us for this spot, but unfortunately, schedules being what they are, he was unable to be here. But to Jorge, I wish you were here. And I'll make sure you get a view of this on YouTube. And I'm sure you and I will be getting together to do this very same tasting very soon. So these three grapes, Palomino, Moscatel, Muscat, and Pedro Jimenez, are the only three grapes used in the production of the seven different types of sherry. And those 7 different types, and I have them arrayed here, I don't have all 7, are Fino, Manzanilla, which means chamomile in Spanish, unrelated, Amontillado, Oloroso, which means fragrant in Spanish, Palo Cortado, which means kind of a cross and cut off, and I'll explain why they call it Palo Cortado. Then there's cream sherry, which I don't have any of here on the table, and then there's Pedro Jimenez, which is in this glass and is also in another one for later. So that's your different background on the actual grapes. So how is sherry made? So using the 3 grapes that I talked to you about, the wine is aged and blended using something very unique called a Solera system. And a Solera system is a system, I'll send you some pictures of it so you kind of get a visual of it. A Solera is a stacked barrels, and the Solera is kind of considered the bottom rung, and on the top there's a layer called criadera. And they feed the Palomino and the Moscatel and the Pedro Jimenez grapes into these different barrels, and they time how long they're in each barrel. It could be for years. And the only sherry that goes into the bottle eventually comes out of the bottom Solera. So it's basically a process of aging and fractional blending that in such a way that the sherry, anytime you drink a sherry, it's always a blend. There's very, very rare times that it's just one different grape. But it's always a blend because they blend different years, different grapes, and the people that make the sherry are very adept at putting together quite a drink for you. So the Solera is a layer of bottom casks, and the Criadera, as I said before, are the casks above the Solera. And the final wine, as I said, is always bottled from the Solera, except in the case of this one, this is just a one press, and they take the green grapes from the Pedro Jimenez, and you get the wine as it is. So that's how sherry is made in general. One of the things that happens with sherry, and if you notice in the color here, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute, is that the exposure to the grape is mitigated by something called the vela de flor, the veil of a flor. Flor is a yeast covering that prevents the wine, especially the Palomino grape and the others, from oxidizing before they want it to. Once you lift that veil of flor, it either breaks down or they remove it, the wines start to oxidize, which is what you see in the glasses beyond these first two. And when you think of why that happens, think of peeling the skin off of an apple, and in about 20 minutes it starts to turn brown. Well, if you notice here, these wines all have different layers of golden brown, amber type color, which happens to all fruit that has a skin, just like a grape, that is exposed to oxygen. That's called oxidation. So the floor is the layer of yeast that happens naturally from being exposed to the air, and it keeps the Fino and Manzanilla from oxygen. So in a sense, when you pour a Fino, which is in this glass, and a Manzanilla, which is in this glass, that's their first exposure to oxygen. So they will now begin their own process of breaking down. So 90% of all sherry is made from the Palomino grape. All of these grapes are technically green/white grapes. And the only way sherry gets its color is through this process of oxidation, which means that the floor is minimized in the making of these sherries. All sherry is eventually fortified with grape spirit to give it a little bit more power. These are not something where you sit down and you break out a glass and have it with two people, or a bottle and have it with two people. It's generally very strong, and I'll go through each of these bottles along the way. And 98% of all sherry is non-vintage, meaning that it's a blend from the Solera system. It's very rare that you'll find some sherries. And like all wines, you can get these at a very modest price, and if you want to get vintage sherries, it starts to get really up there in terms of price. So what I'd like to do with you now is walk through you all of the different forms of sherry that are prominent in the sherry drinking world. Before we do that, I think that dog in the background wants some of my sherry. So let me set that aside, and let me start with our first type of sherry. And so that I can give you just a primary rule of thumb, there's a saying with the Spanish that if it swims, you pair it with Fino, or maybe Manzanilla. If it flies, you pair it with Amontillado, and I'm talking about your food. And if it runs, you pair it with your Olorosos. So let me talk about the different types. The first one in this glass is called Fino, and I got this one in this bottle. And if you look at it, this one is, they say it's ideal with Serrano ham, seafood, and tapas of all kinds. It is 15%. So there's some red wines that you can get, but it's pretty big. That's not your normal white wine. So that is your Fino sherry. They are available in these smaller bottles. So let's taste this one. Let's start out here. You know, I'm going to be point blank. This is not my favorite, but if you put it with food, it mitigates, because this has got a big, very strange, salty, almondy, kind of acidic kind of nose to it. Drank alone, kind of very tart, and you'd go, is there something wrong with that? And my answer to you is no. One of the recommendations that they say for having Fino and Manzanilla especially is with food, with tapas. You can sip it alone, but most people don't. So let's try it with a piece of the famous cheese Manchego from Spain, which is one of the recommended pairings. So, nuttiness to this cheese, which this is nutty almondy. Completely different profile. Cuts right through it. It actually makes the cheese taste better. They also say that seafood goes well. So I'm going to take a piece of shrimp. I'm going to wash it down. With this Fino sherry. The salt, the protein. That just got a lot better. We'll have a word of caution. Drink these chilled. All of them. You don't want to drink any of these sherries warm. So that's the driest and the youngest of the sherries. It only comes from Jerez, and El Puerto de Santa Maria. So that is Fino Sherry, and you'll find it fairly easily if you're interested in looking for it. So let me set that one aside, and we'll move on to Fino's cousin, Manzanilla. This is the one that my good friend George turned me on to, because I had sniffed it and I was like, nah, this isn't working for me. He said, well, try it. So I gave it a shot, and I've loved it ever since. I haven't had a lot of it around because it's one of those things that if you don't drink it, it'll spoil, and it's not something that you want to drink all the time. So it's kind of a little bit of a specialty wine. So let me read to you from the bottle here. Aged in casks in our El Puerto cellar using a floating layer of yeast known as the flor, and it's made using the traditional Solera system. So this unique aging process in the humid maritime conditions of Sanlúcar, this one comes from Sanlúcar de Barrameda. If you remember, I talked about the Sherry Triangle. And this one has a salty, yeasty aroma, dry, crisp, and delicate and smooth to the taste. So let's see if that pans out. Oh, much milder. Very similar to the Fino, but one of the classic combinations in Spain is to have some Marcona almonds. If you're familiar with these, they're nice and salty. If you get them at Wegmans, they usually put them in a little oil. Damn, these are good. And then you wash it down with the manzanilla. Oh my God, completely transforms it. I'm going to take a piece of this shrimp, and we're going to do the same thing. If you can get past that little bit of tanginess, that is worth the time. And they do say here, once you open these, they have to be consumed within a few days. So that's unfortunate, but I'm going to have my friend Jorge help me dispose of these appropriately. So the next one I want to go with you is the Amontillado. And if you remember, very famous American poet Edgar Allan Poe, probably one of his best short stories, The Cask of Amontillado, is definitely related, and I'm going to put a post up for you about it. There's an interesting fact about how Amontillado relates to why Edgar Allan Poe actually wrote that piece. So basically what Amontillado is, which is here in this bottle, is the first two, the Fino, and that's the one in this glass. Notice the difference in color. And Amontillado, that is 3 to 5 years old and then fortified to 18%. Now this one happens to be about 17%, but this one has allowed exposure to the air that gives it the brown tinge that you see here in the glass. So, and it says this one is amber in color, medium dry, fuller bodied than a Fino, ideal as an aperitif, delicious with soups, Thai foods, and cheeses. So with that in mind, the cheese that is good for Oloroso is supposed to be cheddar. So we'll let these pieces of cheddar wow, a little bit more syrupy, a little bit more caramelly on the palate. This is one you could probably sip alone. It's sweet enough. The residual sugar in these starts to go up with the more oxygen that they expose them to. So that is your Amontillado. This bottle's a little bit bigger And given that this one is a little bit higher ABV, it will probably keep a little longer. So let's move on then to the next one called Oloroso. Oloroso is, and let me get the bottle, aged in casks in the traditional Solera system. Oloroso means aromatic. It's got flavors. They actually say you can pair this with mature cheeses and also with red meats and other things. The pairing that we're going to do with the Oloroso is Swiss cheese. Sometimes Olorosos can be aged up to 40 years. Apologize for talking with food in my mouth. I got news for you, gang. I'm convincing myself this is getting better as we go down the road here. So let's set that one up. We don't want to let that there. Set that one aside. Now, there is one, and we'll set that one aside. It's a very unique sherry, and that is the next one. It's 100% Palomino, but the name of it is Palo Cortado. And a palo is a line, and the sherry makers today even, cortado means cut off. So it's basically they put a cross on the barrel. For some reason, the Palo Cortados, they start as a fino and a manzanilla, and on their own, the floor and the yeast break up and kind of disappear, and you wind up with a Palo Cortado. And then it needs a little bit further fortification, and it becomes oxidized like the last one we just had, like an Oloroso, but it is crisper like an Amontillado. You can smell the sugar. It's a little bit, it's got notes of dried fruits, vanilla, and mature wood. I would say that is true. And this bottle, this is a dessert wine almost. This is a 20%. So it's got some vanilla notes on it. Definitely crisp. And one of the things that they recommend, and I had my wife dig out some Ghirardelli chocolate chips, the dark ones. Sorry, I'm just enjoying myself. It's got a little orange rind tint on it at the end with the chocolate. I know some people don't like orange and chocolate. I happen to love it. Oh man, let's do that again. These are all like different wines, and they're all made as sherry, or as the Spaniards say, Jerez. So that, my friends, is Palo Cortado, aged 12 years. It says 12 años right on the bottle. So I must say, in terms of availability, these buggers are not the easiest to find, so you're going to have to do your own wine research. PA is not going to help you out too much. And now, finally, as we move to the sweetest of all of the sherries, in the glass before you, you see what is called the PX, they call it Pedro Ximénez. And the Pedro Ximénez, this results, and they talk about how they, basically what happens, Pedro Ximénez is a green grape, but they let it raisin, and raisins turn brown. No matter what happens, there are white raisins, but these grapes are let to dry and they get brown. And then they press them. And then you get this juice here that's this color. And it is I don't even know the residual sugar. I'm guessing it's 8-10%. It could be even higher. This is very sweet. So if you have a sweet tooth, this may be the only sherry that you want to seek out. But just make sure if you go to look for a Pedro Jimenez sherry. If you like raisins, this is like drinking liquid raisins or liquid figs. It's fantastic. One of the things they tell you to do, which I'm not going to do tonight because it was warm out here, is pour it over vanilla ice cream, like a syrup. I didn't do that. I'm going to pair it in a different way. But it is served lightly chilled as a dessert wine. It says popular with or on ice cream, excellent with all chocolate desserts, and classically paired with blue cheese, which I can absolutely see. But I can tell you what Doc G's going to pair it with. I'm going to pair it with a nice dried fig. Also courtesy of my favorite supermarket, Wegmans. So now, we'll see. It's like drinking the fig. It's like I just stirred this fig. You could dip this fig in here. Let me put them together. Oh, I just mixed the two right in la boca. What a great combo. What a great way to finish. Now, I promised you at the end I would show you a great distinction. In this glass, is the Pedro Jimenez grape. In this glass is the Pedro Jimenez grape. Totally different profiles. This one is fantastic. Oh, as they say in Spanish, Dios mío, qué bueno. And this is also Pedro Jimenez. This is probably going to taste a little funny after all that sugar. Not funny, you just can't taste it, but it's still crisp. My point being, it all comes down to the way the winemaker wants to take the wine and wants to deal with it. This grape, obviously, was as soon as it was harvested, it was pressed into a white wine. This one, they lay it in the sun, let it dry, and then the wine is manufactured under the Solera system and blended and aged and becomes this sweet, decadent. If you don't like any sherry, I don't know how anyone could not like the sweet version of Pedro Jimenez. And I know that you could probably find sweet Pedro Jimenez wherever it is you shop for wines and spirits. So, my friends, gracias, or as they say in Spain, gracias, for joining me tonight and welcoming the almost impending summer. Next time, believe it or not, all of you who have been following me, we are on the cusp of 1 year of sending you all of these videos. Couldn't be more excited about that. So, my next segment, I'm not sure what it will be. If you remember last year, when I did the first one, it was to welcome the Memorial Day holiday. So the next time, it's going to be an anniversary for all of us and all of you that have been along with me all along the way. I've appreciated your viewing. I know there's a core of you out there that tune in. I'm so happy for that. I'm doing this just for the love of the wine, for the love of having you watch. And I hope that we can expand our group in the coming year. And I actually would like to maybe eventually meet some of you someday. And I feel free again to continue to weigh in on the things that we're doing, and feel free to share your wine adventures and posts as we approach the first year of Doc G's Wine and Spirits Review. So again, thank you, gracias, y hasta la próxima.